in a world overrun with the fake, delusional, and disingenuous. He stands as a beacon of truth. He is Abuki Cabal. You are listening to Abuki Cabal.
What's going on, everybody?
Welcome to the Abuki Cabal Show.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification button if you like the content. Today, I'm going to cover the Atlantic article dealing with the trouble with boys and men, and I would suggest that you buy the book that the gentleman who in the interview wrote. It's covering a lot of the things that we have taken issue with here in the manosphere, and the lack of attention that's being paid in the political spheres regarding the outcomes of boys and men in society as a result of uplifting one sector of society while basically doing nothing for the other society, the other portion of society, i.e. men and boys. We're doing everything that we can to highlight, black girl magic, and, how women are in college more than men, women are making more than men, all these things. But, men are still required or expected, to do the things that we've always done, provide, protect, all of that. But we have less resources to do that. So this book looks at a lot of the data that has been produced by this type of lack of attention to the needs of boys and men. So we're going to take a look at that and see what he has to say about that. Then we'll look at the article after the interview. Okay. All right.
Why are men and boys struggling, and what should we do about it? The Atlantic magazine recently asked that of its readers and evoked a record number of responses. The discussion was inspired by statistics from the new book by my next guest, Richard Reeves. In the U.S., the 2020 decline in college enrollment was 7 times greater for male than for female students. Among men with only a high school education, 1 in 3 is out of the labor force. For those who have a job, typical earnings are $881 a week, down from $1,017 a week in 1979. Mortality from drug overdose, suicide, and alcohol-related illnesses are almost 3 times higher among men than women. Just a tip of the iceberg of the alarming findings in Reeves' book, which is called Of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling and Why It Matters and What to Do About It. Richard.
All right. So there you have the introduction there, but I wanted to jump in right quick and basically point out that over the last, 3, maybe 4 years or so, we have been watching the spotlight being put on how much women are being how much they're struggling, how much they're being victimized, also about how how much these trans people are being victimized and how they are struggling in society, and how many of them are committing suicide, how many suicides in young girls because they're being subjugated and whatnot. But and all kinds of attention and programs and everything that they can muster up to try to change that outcome is being thrown at that problem. Yet we see that the data is showing that the need of men and boys in society is far greater, yet no resources are being allocated to solve that problem. That's interesting, don't you think? We always see the data being characterized in a way to show that everybody else is struggling more than males. Yet the data doesn't indicate that. Yet we heard nothing about anything, any programs, any focus on men and boys in this country, on jobs, on education, on any of that. But these people are supposed to be in touch with, what we need as a society. They're supposed to be representing, their constituents on the problems that they see in society. Well, the data is right in front of them. It's right here. It's been here for the longest, that men and boys need attention, yet we still see more and more and more resources and attention being focused on these feminist and homosexual needs and struggles. They're even being boosted up to appear or to be described as being worse than men and boys, but they aren't. So let's see what Richard Reeves has to say about this.
Richard Reeves joins me now. He's a senior fellow in economic studies at the Brookings Institute, where he's the director of the Men and Boys Project. So, Richard, have we had some mass psychological breakdown, or is it something else?
No, I think this is a structural problem. Michael, you've just talked about the changes in the labor market. We've seen a decline in traditionally male jobs in manufacturing and heavy industry. That's hit working class men particularly hard. But also the education system is really now failing many of our boys. We've seen girls and women succeeding in the education system, which is, of course, a wonderful thing, but they've blown way past boys and men. And actually, there are many aspects of the education system now that are not very male friendly. And the result of that is for many men to just be struggling in the family and in life in general. And it's high time we paid serious attention to the problems of boys and men.
Is it all just a natural consequence of women entering the workforce and attaining rights that, frankly, they should have had a lot sooner?
I think part of it is just adjusting to a world of equality. And there's something to be said for the fact that's difficult. If you were previously unfairly ahead, as many men were, then this is something of a recalibration. But the main reasons, I think, lie well beyond that. There's no reason to think that because women are in employment that men should be in employment less. There's no reason to think that fathers matter any less just because women are in the workplace. Arguably, fathers matter even more now that we've changed the world so that women can work too. And so it's not a zero-sum game. There's no evidence that the rise of women is responsible for the fall of men. But we are seeing many men struggling, even as many women are doing better in the labor market and in the world in general. And so we can think two thoughts at once. We can think there's more to do for girls and women, but still we should pay attention to some of these problems of boys and men.
No, we should pay attention to all of these problems dealing with boys and men. And he hit some interesting points of how, higher education is not necessarily male friendly. I know when I was in college, I had quite a few run-ins in some classes and with some professors that didn't have my best interest or my success in mind when dealing with me, and it was quite evident. So I'm sure that that happens on a much larger scale, because I've heard stories from every college you can imagine that guys have gone to, and they've had problems dealing with certain things and having to basically, not say or question certain things, certain doctrines, even though you're in a institute of higher learning and a place where questions should be asked and explored. It's not really a place where you can basically engage in thought, free thought, and scholarship. So, with that being said, also, I want to give credit where credit is due. BGS has been talking about this for years. Dr. Tiason Johnson's been talking about this. Gigi's been talking about this. Green Gorilla. So you have these individuals who have been talking about this, about these issues. Kevin Samuels talked about these issues. Obsidian has talked about these issues. So there are a lot of things that we have been talking about forever that women have basically been telling us that we were just, jealous, or, we weren't doing anything but just talking. We're wasting time, all of these things. Yet you see a lot of these issues are being looked at in a serious manner, because they have been serious, which shows that in this sphere that there is a lot of thought that's taking place. A lot of mental energy is being levied on problem solving. I would dare say that it is a think tank in itself to try to solve some of these problems. I talked to a local politician about Dr. Tiason Johnson's, his plan for a political agenda to look out for men and boys. So I talked to him about that, and he was very positive about some of the things that we talked about, and some of the things that are suggested in Dr. T's plan. So we are moving the needle forward, and let this among other things, light a fire under some of us to continue to do what we're doing, and to try and to talk about the problems in our community, as well as the problems that are happening with us as males that are unique to us, and our position in nature, in society. So I think this is a good thing. So let's move on.
Is this a problem unique to the United States?
No, most of the trends that you've just identified at the top of the segment are true everywhere. So in every advanced economy, there are now more women with a college degree than men. In the US, it's 60-40 for women. The US is unusual in that the economic position of men seems to have been hit particularly hard. So most American men today earn less than most American men did in 1979. That's a fairly extraordinary economic fact, and that's not true across the world. And so the economic changes seem to have hit American men harder than in other countries.
So, Richard, you've convinced me there's an issue. There's a problem here for men and for boys, and I read and gained great insight from the book. We just had a very contentious midterm election. I have no recollection of any candidate, Republican, Democratic, Independent, championing the cause that you are raising. Why is that the case? Why does no one seem to speak to this issue who is a representative?
I think many are afraid that if you raise the issues of boys and men, that'll somehow mean that you're less concerned with the ongoing challenges facing girls and women. That's particularly true among Democrats, of course. I think that's a false choice. I think that if I was the Democrats, I would have made a big deal of the fact that the infrastructure bill, for example, was going to create, of the jobs it was creating, 70% would have gone to men. Mostly working class men of all colors, actually. But no mention was made of that because of this fear that it will somehow seem that you're less interested in women and girls. And I think that for conservatives, they would much rather talk about issues like marriage, going back to the 50s, etc.
Now, Didn't we talk about that when we were talking about Stacey Abrams and how, she was not trying to put forth anything that was going to help men, and also that the Democratic Party was not necessarily pushing things that were pro men. And he says it. I mean, plain and simple, that infrastructure bill would have made jobs for 70% of the jobs would have been for men. But anything that looks like it is pro man and women won't benefit from it, which is a problem today. And you will see women coming out in droves trying to undermine a bill that is good for the country, good for the communities. If those men are making money, their families are doing well, which means their wives are doing well, their children are doing well, but they don't see it that way because they look at things from an individualistic position, which is, what about me? What am I getting out of it? What are the women alone getting out of it? Everything has to be partitioned off. They don't look at it like it's always been looked at, that if that man is making money, he can take care of his wife, his household, and his family. The woman can be working too, which that's fine, but the main breadwinner, is supposed to be that man. If that man cannot provide, then he is looked upon as not being a worthy mate, a viable mate for that woman. There's something primal about that's deep inside of us that we cannot control, that's instinctive when we look at or looking for, a mate. There's certain things that are just going to trigger. These things are impulsive. They're natural directives. So we see this now with women making more money. They see men as not having a purpose, a role, in their lives anymore. And it is a detrimental position that is being created in society. Let's move on.
And they want to talk about gender in a way that doesn't allow for the reality and the wonderful news of more gender equality. So for different reasons, we're really being failed on this front by our political leaders.
Among the subjects, among the solutions that you advance, red shirting, what's the short version of what that would be all about?
Boys have fallen well behind girls in the education system at every level. And one reason for that is that boys' brains mature later than girls. And again, this is not a surprise to anyone that has sons and daughters, knows boys and girls, has ever been a boy or a girl, which is that a 15, 16-year-old boy and girl, they're not equivalent in terms of their brain development. And so what that means is that girls are at something of an advantage just because they develop earlier, partly because they hit puberty earlier. So redshirting is a proposal whereby boys would start school a year later than girls in terms of their chronological age. That would somewhat narrow the developmental gap and would actually create more of a level playing field in education than the one we have right now, simply because of these biological differences in the timing of brain development, which means, as I said, that 16-year-old girls are about a year ahead of the typical 16-year-old boy.
And one final thought, if more women are pursuing a college education than men, that's going to have a significant impact on marriage and ultimately on mating, right? I mean, that trend is a long-term trend.
It's a long-term trend. It might, is the honest answer, Michael. We don't know yet what impact it'll have on marriage. The key question is going to be the extent to which women are willing to marry men who are less educated than men. Already, wives are on average a bit more educated than their husbands. Will they be willing to do that? I think that might depend on the economic circumstances of the guy. Like a nurse may well marry a plumber, but I think it needs to be played out, and we'll see. It could have a negative impact. We just don't know yet.
Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for your willingness to come and discuss it. Really appreciate it.
Well, he's saying that we don't know. I think they do know. I think they're starting to see the initial data coming in showing that it is affecting marriage and mating. The example that he gave about a nurse marrying a plumber. Well, a nurse and a plumber could, end up, pretty much coming out, even. If that's a male nurse, that male nurse can make quite a bit of money through working more than what most female nurses are willing to work. And plumbers make quite a bit of money. So, he's obviously, thinking that that's going to be a female nurse and a male, plumber. I don't think you see very many female plumbers. I've never seen one, but I'm sure they're out there. So, yeah, I think we've talked about this, all the time around and hear women say out of their own mouths that they just, wouldn't date certain people just from the optics of it, not necessarily knowing how much that man makes, but just the optics of what he looks like and what that being with that man would look like as far as, to other women, because we all know that, it's all about, the optics of it. It's about, what it looks like, because they compete with each other, with dress, with the type of men that they get, all of that. So, yeah. So, let's, get out of this, and we're going to go ahead and go to the article. Okay. So I'm going to cue up the article and see what that says, and we'll cover that. Here we go.
Question of the week. Why are men and boys struggling? What should we do about it? Send your responses to Connor@theatlantic.com or simply reply to this email. Conversations of note. Those questions are top of mind this week due to the Brookings scholar Richard Reeves in his just-released book, Of Boys and Men, which proceeds from the proposition that men at the top are still flourishing, but men in general are not. Men are struggling in school, in the job market, and in family life. They are the gender most likely to end up in prison and most vulnerable to deaths of despair. Reeves grounds those characterizations of males as in trouble in lots of statistics. Here are a few. In the U.S., the 2020 decline in college enrollment was 7 times greater for male than for female students. Among men with only a high school education, 1 in 3 is out of the labor force. For those who have a job, typical earnings are $881 a week, down from $1,017 in 1979. Mortality from drug overdoses, suicides, and alcohol-related illnesses are almost 3 times higher among men than women. In Reeves's telling, the left and right both fail in their responses. The left tends to pathologize naturally occurring aspects of masculine identity. He writes, to see male struggles as individual failings rather than structural problems, to deny any biological basis for sex differences, and to proceed as if gender inequality can only run one way, that is, to the disadvantage of women. Though conservatives pay more attention to the growing problems faced by boys and men, he continues, their agenda is equally unhelpful. They fuel male grievances for political gain, which simply creates more anger and discontent. They overweight the importance of biological differences for gender roles. And they see solutions as lying in the past rather than the future, in the form of a restoration of traditional economic relations between male providers and female carers rather than helping men adapt to the new world. An example of a solution that he proposes, because boys mature more slowly than girls, start them in school a year later, rather than starting both sexes at the same age despite their differences. Or, to echo a book excerpt that The Atlantic published in the magazine's October issue, Redshirt the Boys. For those of you who like listening to podcasts, Reeves's interview with Andrew Sullivan is a good introduction to the book and its arguments. In a New York Times column about the book, David Brooks writes, I come away with the impression that many men are like what Dean Acheson said about Britain after World War II. They have lost an empire but not yet found a role. Many men have an obsolete ideal. Being a man means being the main breadwinner for your family. Then they can't meet that ideal. Demoralization follows. Ambition doesn't just happen, it has to be fired. The culture is still searching for a modern masculine ideal.
Okay. This premise that, men being the breadwinner is obsolete. They keep saying that, but what are you hearing from the women? The women are still requiring that men be breadwinners, that men provide, that men pay bills. But then you have people here, who are supposed to be learned people, who are supposed to be looking at the data and saying that, that's an outdated, dinosaurish idea. It can't be both, because what they're saying and what women are saying is two different things. I know you guys hear this too, because I'm hearing it from every different angle. You know, if a man does not provide, he is nothing. You know, he is a Pookie and a Ray Ray. You know, whatever the white folks call them. You know, and the Mexicans call them, and whoever else. You know, but you are a useless man if you're not getting up and going and making money and doing things. You are nothing. You are seen as nothing in this society. So I don't see how that is an outdated concept, you know? So let's move on.
Whereas Times columnist Michelle Goldberg argues that the solutions proposed by the book do too little to address political and economic decisions that have made American life brutal, in different but overlapping ways, for women and men both. I look forward to your thoughts on this subject, especially if informed by observations from your life or people in your family, community, or industry. For more food for thought on this subject, see The Atlantic articles The War Against Boys, from 2000, by Christina Hoff Sommers, and The End of Men, from 2010, by Hannah Rosin.
Okay. And I did a show on is the idea of masculinity worth saving. It was a questionable article, to say the least. But I think it's an interesting premise, but I'm not sure. It's questionable as to how they're talking about dealing with this problem. You guys, let me know what you think in the comments. But I'm glad that it's being talked about in bigger circles, and that's a good thing. And hopefully we'll just continue to address the problems and talk about these problems and solutions to these problems, and hopefully that'll reach the powers that be as well. So, like I said, let me know what you guys thought about the article and the interview in the comments, and we will go from there. You guys go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you guys listening, and see you next time.
I feel like a